Okay, so here we are talking about IDX augmentations from an SEO perspective. Basically just going to talk to Tracy right on the board, and then she has a visual and audio recording of what we're trying to get done here. Okay, so starting with title ideas. Basically, you want to work with the algos, right? So, you know, if you have a bunch of customers in the same market, obviously you want to have a differentiation in their title. What we typically do is we typically just change up the elements and make it static. One idea to take it a step further is actually have random combinations of these titles, right? So like, you know, that would make it even a little bit more. Another idea would be to insert random keywords. Like you can create like an array, right? So like keyword 1, keyword 2, etc. So that this could be, you know, inserted. You know, you've got your standard element 1, standard element 2, and then keyword, and then standard element 3. So, I mean, obviously this is something we probably want to develop on our own, right? As opposed to somebody paying for it. But then once we have this process down, we have the script down, you know, it would give a lot more differentiation in the titles. Moving on, next element is what? Meta description. Okay. So meta description, we typically just take the first bits of the property description, put it in the meta description. A couple things in here, just from a conversion perspective. I'd like to see contact. I'd like to see this cut off a few characters before the description is done, and have there actually contact and then the phone number at the end of the meta description. Right? So in that case, you have to know what the maximum characters are for the meta description, right? The other thing is, how do we make this unique if we're using the property description every time? Once again, we could come up with an algorithm that goes, just in the very beginning, that uses a few simple stats, like, you know, this X bed, X bath, square foot property type has the following description. So you could start that, right? And then that would be sort of random. And then that's just this, you know, again, it would have to be changed up on a customer to customer basis, because if we did this for every customer, the same algorithm, then it kind of defeats the purpose, right? So there's a couple of things in there. Now this thing here is more important to look at in terms of globally, right? Like on the details page, for instance, right? We have all this data. We basically have 3 columns of data, and we can build these somewhat cookie cutter algorithms out of this, right? So this could be, you could be your meta description, right? You have your regular property description. You could re-summarize a lot of these facts in a written way, in a written format, which would change it from the more tabular format, right? So you could create. So you got your property description up here, and just before this tabular data, for instance, would be an example of where you could put it, right in here on the details page itself. Just put into words sort of a cookie cutter of this. It adds a different element to the page, right? Now conceptually, a little harder to do for the team, but file names are also something you'd want to look at. We have the image. We need to document the way that the image optimization works on the snippets, right? The one we had created by Tony.
Yeah.
Because that we don't really have documentation for. So if we're going to present that, we should document how it works and the whole point of it. We could probably and should probably look at image optimization for the primary image of the when you get to the details page as well. Right? The main large image, for instance, this should be optimized with keywords, alt tag, title tag, if not file name. Right? I know file name is somewhat challenging, but this should have an alt tag and a title tag on it as well. Some other ideas for the details page. Comments. If they're permitted, you need to check with the board for the most part. However, I think after the disclaimer line, I think you can have a comment section about the property above without having to worry about compliance at all. Because this is basically just the ability to comment on any page, right? Obviously we have to be very careful about auto-generated comments. We don't do that, or we haven't done that. Is there a way to do it? What you could do is you could create an algorithm-based comment for the first comment of every one of these. That works very much like those descriptions that we had before, right? Except it's structured in a way to elicit more comments, right? So basically, hey, if you have more, if you have more questions about X, Y, Z, blah, 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 little algorithm comment, please post them below. We'd love to hear your feedback, right? So like a call to action that has some bit of unique cookie cutter comment sort of thing in there, right? That's really just a call to action to invite people to comment. This always has to go into a moderation queue, of course, because you don't want other agents being able to come by and be like, hey, if you have questions about this property, call me instead, right? Or complain because this is their listing or whatever. What else do we have? Interlinking. So the simplest example of interlinking is the related properties. Designers often do this with photos and some stats and call to actions. I like the way that looks, but it doesn't give you a ton of related properties because you don't have a ton of room for it. It's typically only 4 across. This can be expanded dramatically. You can do this as the showcase related properties, but then you could create a sidebar all down the line here that could be just, related by price. And you could just put the addresses within a price range, right? Related by location. And you can interlink these a lot of different ways, which builds far more options for the user to click on, right? But also it builds more links to these pages, right? And we can really, without slowing down the page too much, which is the major concern, other than that, we can load these without bound links because property details pages themselves, they don't need a lot of internal page rank, right? So it's okay to have lots of links going out from them. So they can be treated as details page / sitemap, right? You just got to make sure you keep this section separate from the disclaimer section. It's kind of a next step if you're not looking at this property. You don't want to take the focus away from this property. So the related properties is a big one. The other one we've looked at is basically file detect, is what we'll call this. Sounds like, or looks like file deflect, but whatever. File detect is basically, it looks at a key element such as, the city name. For instance, I'll use Sarasota. If this property details page was a Sarasota property details page, we could have related links here, or related pages. This looks in the CMS for anything with Sarasota in it. So your Sarasota real estate page would actually get a link in here. So you're building pages not just from details page to details page, but from details page to internal page. You can do this with blog categories, you can do this all sorts of things, right? So that's a really handy element as well. Probably a good place to stop, just so we have enough to digest, and this would start as the basis of the optimization for your IDX.